Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is me, Mysterious Careman, and today I am reviewing Harry Potter 3 and 4. So this is part 2 of 4 of my series, where I am reviewing every single Harry Potter film. The first episode was at movies 1 and 2, this 3 and 4, then 5, 6, and then 7 and 8. Or 7 part 1 and part 2. So I have very mixed feelings on these two films. I mean, like, comparatively, I feel very strongly about the ways I feel about these films, I think. So, I don't really have much else to say. Check out the first part if you're interested. It's a fun video. But yeah, let's jump into this thing. This is probably one of my favorite films of all time, Harry Potter 3. I will say, I did not see Harry Potter for years prior to rewatching the series. I took like a year, 2-year break, which might not seem like so long, but for me, as the massive Harry Potter fan I am, that was like the longest break I've ever taken since prior to ever reading the books. So like, it's a pretty big thing. So I always used to love the Half-Blood Prince book. I haven't read it, the whole series in years, so I don't remember. Like, I'm not going to judge the books, I'm judging the films, but I used to always think that Half-Blood Prince was my favorite film. We'll talk about that when I rewatch it. Well, I've already have, but like when I get to that video. But I always I never liked the third book, I will say. I've never been such a huge fan of the third book, but I've loved the third movie, but just never that much. On this rewatch, it has become extremely clear that the Harry Potter 3 is the best Harry Potter film. I know this is not an unpopular opinion. I know this is probably the most popular opinion out there. I know plenty of people like this movie, and it's good. I really like that there's two whimsical films. I don't like them much, but I feel like the transition between those and into this darker toned film really sets the stage for what comes next, because it's dark, but it also has the heart of Harry Potter. Because when you get to the David Yates films, you will see that those films are dark, but they don't have all the charm that the old films had. Well, some. I'll get to that in another video, but this one I feel like felt gradual. It felt like the characters grew up, and I feel like this is the one film that really had the tone matching the plot perfectly. I think after having a first film, which I don't really know how to describe the plot, to like a detective story, I think Harry being hunted almost is such an interesting idea, because it's not necessarily a murder mystery. We know who the murderer is. It's more like a murder hunting. Like, I think it's a very interesting idea, kind of how in the last film Harry's hunting the basilisk, and in this one Sirius Black is hunting Harry, or as they thought. And I think it sets the stage immediately. The film, I think, opens with Marge coming through the front door. I'm almost certain. And it's, even from then, you see something different. Even from that first shot, you'll hear the voices, and then the camera cuts on. That is, like, it shows a very personal, like, you can see, Alfonso Cuarón, I think that's the director, personality in that first shot. And I think that directing personality is seen throughout the whole film, and it's so apparent. They're really, genuinely just great people in this project. And everything that goes into this film, I feel like, feels like a step up. I think the actors, because there's a 2-year gap between movies 2 and 3, the actors grow significantly. And because they're so young at this point, like an older, like a 30-year-old person wouldn't grow so much in 2 years. However, at this age, their acting skill grows so much in those 2 years that you feel like you're watching actual characters now, instead of like kids who don't know what they're doing. Now I feel like I'm watching Harry Potter. Like, I feel like this is when the movies get good. And even though this is the height of the series, it's not saying so much. Like, I think this is the best directed and looking film, and overall the best film, but I don't think that it has the strongest story out of all of them. I just think overall it uses the story it's given to its best. And I'm a little bit surprised that Alfonso Cuarón didn't return for the fourth film after this, but I don't know. But I think this film, it portrays the Dementors so well. And I think what this film really does is has good transitional shots. It has very good, like really just good transition shots. Like all that good stuff that you want. It has the Whomping Willow vignettes, where throughout the seasons it shows the Whomping Willow. I think that's such a genius idea, setting up the ending. And I think also it shows the Dementors flying around the ground. So even when something good's happening, there's always the looming threat of the Dementors. And it's that looming threat that helps make the story so much better. Because I think if this film was just like the first two, was still whimsical, it wouldn't have worked. Because the entire thing is that the Dementors are supposed to be like horror movie level villains. And Sirius Black is supposed to be scary throughout the majority of the film. So I feel like they did it perfectly, and they used so many interesting shots, especially going through like the glass and the sound effects even when they do that. Is so interesting in the way they view time. Because at the end of the day, this film, even though it has a villain of Peter Pettigrew, kind of like the sixth film, it doesn't have a huge final battle. Like, it does have a final conflict, but it doesn't have a huge duel or anything. It very much has Harry kind of doing his own thing. And that's something I really like. I feel like in this film, he does such a good job doing what he does. I feel like this is in this film when he finally becomes a person. And I feel like Ron and Hermione are so good in this. Like, Harry finally gets to become friends with them, but they grow as characters. And I feel like Harry grows the most and finally starts to become an interesting person to follow. And that is so important when it comes to your main character. Because if you don't like the person you're watching on screen, then why are you watching that project? So I really like Harry in this film. And I think overall this film is just so good. I could rant on for days and days about how good Harry Potter 3 is. The shots. This is what made me fall in love with Harry Potter and Dementors. The way that the ice is formed, the way that the shots are. The mix between the sound humor and the horror and the interesting shots with Michael Gambon now as Dumbledore. That was, in my opinion, an incredible change. So now we have such a strong cast of adult actors and now a strong cast of kid actors. So now there's a good contrast, and they're both good. Like, it's not like good adult actors and decent child actors. Now it's great child actors and even greater adult actors. And even from Dumbledore's first dialogue, that's when you know that this film is really going to get good. And really, everything about this just has a looming threat. It has like an edginess to it that I feel like works for Harry Potter. Instead of it being like, oh, this is just another Wizarding World adventure, it is dark, and it's something that we never get to see again in the series. Because even when the books get more depressing, and the films get more depressing, the films don't necessarily become horror-ish. And that's what I feel like this film does so well. Okay, now that we're done with Harry Potter 3, let's move right into Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. So, I have heard lately that Harry Potter 4 is not the best received. I used to really like this one. I will say, this film's fun. That's the first thing. You can't not enjoy it. I get that some people say it's bad, and I've seen very recently that a lot of people will put this in in the later part of their ranking, and I do see where that's coming from. This film does not have plot. I used to think it did, and I will say it's a fun. Again, I think that has to be made so clear. This film is fun. If you can sit down and watch this thing, and you won't get up. This film is incredibly fun to watch, but it feels like every scene, it doesn't feel like there's an overarching plot or narrative or theme. The whole point of this film is Harry Potter trying to survive to get to the third task. But even though that's what it's about, and there's like Death Eaters in Hogwarts and who put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire, there is great plot points, but I don't think there's overall a huge narrative until you get to the end, and then you're like, oh, so that's why that happened. But throughout the story, even if you look back on it, if Harry, I guess that Moody's like, Harry's name, blah, 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 Goblet of Fire, but a lot of the stuff Moody wouldn't have orchestrated. Some of it, yes, Neville, fine, but Hagrid would have told Harry about the dragons anyway. I think Ron, who was it, Neville, maybe would have known about Gillyweed and told Harry, but if he did, like, I feel like there's so many instances where Moody's like, at the end, like, oh, I orchestrated everything, but he didn't. Like, he orchestrated a few things, and maybe he put the name in the Goblet of Fire, but Harry could have died during the first two tasks. Like, it just is an odd thing. But I will say, this film is fun. I think if you're able to look past the flaws, you will enjoy this project. You will see Harry finally growing as a character, really, and everyone around him also. But I will say what's kind of weak about this film is it is placed in between two very good Harry Potter films. So in this, you will notice that it feels very standalone. It doesn't feel like it has Harry Potter in it. It feels like a holiday special almost. Because it's not about the wizarding world. It's not about learning classes at Hogwarts. This film is about the tournament. So I feel like it takes you out of the film almost. And it's like, oh, it's fun, but what is the point of it almost? Because there's a lot of stuff throughout the film. Like, everything that happens just feels like it's building through the tournament. But it doesn't feel like Harry actually matters in it. Because at the end of the day, the entire thing is just going through the tournament. Which is fun, sure, but I don't think it compares to what the other films do. And I think if you're watching them in order, this will definitely feel like a dip. But I feel like if you're like, every Harry Potter film has a plot, like in the 6th movie, which some people also don't like, they're trying to find what Voldemort's hiding. In the 7th, they're trying to find Horcruxes. In this, it's just Harry living through the tournament. And it shows a very interesting side of the wizarding world and expands it. So when this is like a lighter film and lighter book, before it enters the dark 5th, 6th to 7th, and 7th part 2 books and films. But I don't feel like that this translates as well on screen. And I don't think it has the strongest narrative. It is way stronger in the book, specifically, because the book actually, I feel like, has more plot to it. It has more to Harry, to Ron, to Hermione, and they have more stakes in it. And even Cedric has more of a character. But in this, I feel like they introduced so many new characters. Like, in the 3rd one, they didn't introduce... In each Harry Potter film, they introduce a lot, but they don't always use so much. But in this, they introduced 2 new wizarding schools, Mad-Eye Moody, Barty Crouch Jr., Voldemort, technically, Cedric, Cho, Fleur, whatever, Crumb. Like, that's just 10 already. But there are so many other characters that are introduced in this film. And I think this film is too big for its own good. And there's a lot of fun parts to it. I can't stress this enough. This is a fun film. You will enjoy it. I love watching it because it's fun. But looking at it from a filmmaking perspective, it's not the best. It feels like Harry doesn't necessarily matter to the plot. And at the end of the day, the entire thing, he didn't have to go through the tournament. Harry could have just been apparated to the graveyard. Like, I think this entire film didn't have to happen. Like, in Harry Potter 5, it felt gradual when Voldemort was learning about occlumency. In Harry Potter 3, it felt gradual with the hunt. But in this, they could have just solved this immediately. Like, I feel like if you look at this, there are so many plot holes. But they're not good, like, plot holes. They're like, this is the one film where I feel like it doesn't work, and especially because of its placement in the series, it feels way worse than I think it actually is. But it's fun, but it doesn't have the plot that it needs. And because there are so many tasks, there's the first task, second task, third task, then there's the graveyard, then there's also the Yule Ball. And not even counting the Yule Ball, there is so much action in this film. Not just so much action, but there's so much... Like, I love that there's so much action. And this is the first film where I feel like there's a lot new exploring into magic and the wizarding world. But at the same time, I feel like that this film specifically just doesn't... It feels like, by the end of it, the third task doesn't seem that marvelous. Like, the first task felt very interesting, and so did the second one. The third one kind of just feels Because in the books, there's like I remember specifically the Sphinx. But there was a lot of tasks within the task. But in this one, in the film at least, it kind of just felt like a little dueling game. So it just was odd decisions in my opinion. But overall, I still really enjoyed this film. I just don't think it's one of the best. And yeah, besides that, that is my review of Harry Potter 3 and 4, Harry Potter the Prisoner of Azkaban, and Harry Potter the Goblet of Fire. I'll be reviewing Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix and Harry Potter Half-Blood Prince in a few weeks, but until then, thank you guys so much for watching this video. See you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.